The DIESOL podcast.
Digital integration in English as a second or other language.
Episode 25. Interview with Weina Li Chen.
Welcome to DIESOL. This is episode number 25, and we are your hosts. I am Brent Warner.
And I'm Michelle Reyes, and I'm super excited about today, Brent.
Oh, yeah. Why?
How are you? I'm in California today.
You're excited because you're in California? Congratulations.
Well, that's number one.
Yeah.
I'm in California, so we're on the same time zone.
I know. That's
and
the
it's
first.
good to be back.
It's been a while, yeah.
I
haven't
know,
seen you, though. Are we planning to do a distance coffee at some point?
I hope so.
Or are you? I mean, I'm on pretty good lockdown, but I do see a few friends, but I don't know how.
Yeah,
lockdown you are.
people are actually really good about social distancing here with the masks compared to back home. As far as I've seen so far. But no, I'm actually happy to see that because, the news always shows Orange County.
Yeah,
So
I know. Okay. So we'll try and meet up for coffee before you leave in person. But why else are you excited? What else is happening?
Well, I'm excited because today we are interviewing Miss Weina Li Chen.
Uh-huh.
And Weina, you say hello.
Hi, everyone. Weina.
So Weina, it's really cool for me to have her on the show, for us to have her on the show, because when I was working at USC, when I was teaching at USC, my first semester there, oh my gosh, this was in 2014,
12.
13, 12?
Wow.
You started in
Jeez.
12. You started in 2012, but I started in 2013 in January. So she was in my grammar class back then. She was a student in my class, and she was one of those people that you never forget, and you're always cheering on because they're just trying everything and not afraid to feel silly when the teacher makes you do seemingly silly things.
Now, what kind of silly things did you make her do?
I would say a lot of people had a no cell phone policy at that time. And I'd be like, those teachers that tell you to put away your cell phone? I'm the opposite. I'm going to say, take out your cell phone right now.
Wait a second. So we have a moment. We have a moment here, Weina. You can tell us what kind of teacher Esol is.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
Yeah.
Story time.
That was not silly at all. All our students loved our teacher Esol at that time. Like, yes, mobile phones. Actually, we were not really, looking at our own apps or anything. We were really engaged in learning. So thank you. You are the teacher who inspired us. I always remember you.
Oh,
thank you so much for inviting me today. Yeah.
Thank you. Those are kind words. But you see, Brent, it's just like, it's a great thing to see one of your students go full circle. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea that Weina was studying to be a teacher. No idea. And so when I think she ended up being a volunteer for TESOL at USC. Oh, okay. And it just my heart just kind of exploded. I was like, oh, this is awesome. So here she is. She's now teaching at Pepperdine. So I guess I should do a proper introduction.
Get that proper introduction in. Let's really get the names in.
Weina Li Chen is actually a third-generation Korean descendant who was born and raised in China. She is now a visiting instructor of MA TESOL over at Pepperdine. She teaches the MA TESOL candidates. She does courses in the MS in Educational Leadership Program and Learning Digital Design and Innovation. I believe it's Educational Leadership Suite. She has extensive experience and passion for multilingualism, educational technology, hybrid, and online learning. And so...
Perfect fit. Love it.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, that's why I'm here today.
Yeah, awesome. So there's a ton of things going on here, and I think we can just kind of have an open conversation, right? Because there's a lot to see. Weina, you're obviously kind of covering all the fields of the things that we like to talk about, which is great. And also, you've come up as a as a language learner through Esol's class and through other classes like that too. So you get an awesome perspective on all sides of it, very well-rounded. So I think we should jump into it. Let's start
do it.
talking.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I am a English language learner, still a English language learner, right?
Me too. Don't worry.
When now
Me
when I do a
three.
podcast, I'm super nervous. I'm trying to, you know, so definitely you were right, Brent. From an English language learner's perspective, I always trying to see how this teaching approach will fit students' needs, right? If I'm teaching a student who are not proficient in that language, what are they feeling right now? Are they anxious, right? Do they need extra help? So in my teacher education field, I try to teach all my teacher candidates the same thing, like try to see from students' perspective and see how you can create a space that is relaxing and risk-free for the students to try and to use their language more often instead of teacher-centered and test-oriented.
Can you talk a little bit, Weina, about this risk-free idea? Because that to me is a pretty big deal for learning and being comfortable. But how do you help students feel that what they're doing is risk-free as they're in classes and as they know they're also in other ways getting grades and things like that?
Definitely. So I am very strong in gamification and game-based learning because I believe when people are playing a game, they are not thinking about to finish an assignment or a project in class. Rather than that, they are thinking how I can get a higher score or how I can beat my my cohorts or my teacher even. So they definitely have a relaxing mindset and then focusing on the task itself, rather than worrying about the result.
So what kind of games are you playing there?
There are so many games. So again, I was inspired by Esol because she used games a lot in her class when I was her student. So when we were in face-to-face, I used a lot of games already. And definitely right now, I try to see if those games can be played online or if there's any alternatives, right? So I can give some examples. For example, Quizlet. I tend to use Quizlet for any language teaching. For example, I was teaching Chinese before, and I use Quizlet to give students as their homework to do. But for them, it's a fun homework. So I've heard from a parent of a second grader that he spent hours and hours trying to get a higher score because I told, there's a matching game for Quizlet, right? So I told the students, let's see by the end of next week if you can beat my score. So the students were very determined and they want to try again to get that score. But at the same time, they were not realizing they were reviewing the vocabularies again and again. So I love that idea. And I saw students were not struggling in the concept of learning, but enjoying their time with technology. So that's one example. Yeah.
An important question. Has any student ever beat your score or matched your score?
Totally.
Oh, really?
So as a teacher, we should intentionally don't try our best to set a high score, right? So I
give them a chance somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I give them a very achievable score first, and then they kind of like refresh that score right away, and then they see other classmates refresh their score. They beat their score. So there is a very good competition going on when you are having this gamed mindset set up.
Yeah, and I like that you're saying you're giving them achievable goals. So you're not giving them something impossible to beat, right? So that way they're able to, in a scaffolded manner, they're able to achieve more each time.
I very much appreciate that because I know if I just my own personality and just doing it, I would straight up go for the best score I could get the first time and not be whatever, you guys got to get I'm going to get a 99%, you're going to have to get 100% or whatever it is to beat me. So, but no, now when you say that, it makes a lot of sense though, because you're like, okay, hey, I'm going to play this and I'm going to play it maybe I'll answer my question a little bit more slowly, or maybe I'll kind of pick an answer that seems kind of close to right and let them see that, and then they can build up to that. But then, so Weina, if this is with Quizlet, right? And so then Weina, can you go back? Because I use quizzes now most of the time, not Quizlet, and so I know that this beat the teacher thing is part of Quizlet, which I should look at. But with going up, then can you go back and readjust your score, like play it again and try and beat your students so that then they have to beat you again? Is that a possibility inside of there?
Definitely, yeah. So you can always participate as a student. You can always participate as a teacher. And then when students see your name, right, ranked number 1, and then they are ranked number 2 because of you, they were like, wait a minute. Okay, so now it's my time to play again. And Mom, can you give me your phone again? Can I have for another hour? I need to beat my teacher.
Can I do homework for another hour? It's like, here you go.
Yeah.
Okay, and then one more thing, just kind of wondering here. So with that, they can also see then other classmates who are on there as well, right? So
Yes.
So this is also fascinating to me because now they're also less encouraged to cheat, so to speak, right? To tell their classmates the answers to the questions because they want to be the highest on the board. Right. And so,
That's right.
so they wouldn't
Yeah.
be like, hey, here's the answers. They would be like, no, I'm not going to tell you the answers because I want to be number 1. I don't want you to be number 1 too. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, I was using the matching game. I don't know if you haven't played it before on Quizlet. So each time the word will be shuffled. So not every student will get the same game.
Okay.
Every time, because you cannot really play the same game every time because you have a huge vocabulary database, and then probably there will be like 10 words generated each time on the screen. So you match the English words and maybe Chinese words, or if you're learning a different language, Spanish words and English words, right? And they match the 2 words. That means the same together. So definitely avoid cheating. Plagiarism.
When we were in face-to-face, we used to do the matching game, and the fastest score will or the faster you type in the answers, the higher chance you have to get that millisecond or whatever it is that the timer has. And my students would want to do the whole class against me. But then they were all paying attention because we did it on a smartboard. So Weina, I wanted to shift over to maybe the way that you use technology to within the student population that you teach, especially since you're teaching teacher candidates. What's your approach in helping them to see the importance of technology? And I know that you do a lot with building learning communities. And so I kind of wanted to ask you about that.
There are, I guess, 2 questions here. Yeah. First of all, using technology, I would say I want the teachers to see the powerful tool, what the powerful tool the technology is, right? But at the same time, I don't want them to think technology is everything, because I don't know if you heard TPAC model, technological, pedagogical, content knowledge. So as a good teacher, especially in right now, the online teaching field, we need to have all 3 elements: technology, pedagogy, and content knowledge. So think about how can I use this technology as a affordance, as a tool to support my pedagogy, to support my teaching strategy. Then just think, okay, this is a cool tool. I'm going to use it for my class, right? That would never work. So I always inspire them to look into the idea of using the simplest technology to support your learning. So I did actually give them a lot of technologies, even like small ones like websites, like random name picker, those things. But I want to expose them as much as possible. And I told them, now figure out a way that it fits your passion, like fits your specialty, and think how can you turn these technology in your own teaching way. So I think that's something I'm focused into right now.
I like that idea of what's the simplest technology that you can do, because again, speaking of my own kind of failures in certain areas, is like I find something that's cool, but it's super complicated, and it's like, okay, you have to spend 30 or 45 minutes just figuring out the basics of this. So
Definitely.
So how do you kind of, when you're talking to pre-service teachers or starting to try and talk to teachers and say, hey, by the way, like technology can really help, I'm assuming that you're using these simple tools to like kind of baby step them into starting with like some, moving towards things that have bigger uses, but that might be too complicated. Where do you start when you're talking about the truly basic?
Definitely. I first always demonstrate how to use the tool, if possible. If it's a tool is enough, simple enough. And also a scaffold. For example, if I ask my students to use Flipgrid for the first time, I wouldn't let them to jump into a presentation by using Flipgrid. I will say, in the next 60 seconds or 90 seconds, introduce yourself. So they are, so they are having a lower anxiety level in creating that video, but instead of that, they focus on how to use that tool first. And then when they master that first step, okay, I can just click this red button, record my video. Okay, now what? So next assignment, you can give them actual guidance. Like, for example, talk about this book review and then watch 2 of your other classmates' videos and respond to them, right? So you're increasing the tasks, but also give them a time to discover different features of the technology tools.
That is so important, right? In order for students to feel comfortable, or people who are using teachers to feel comfortable with the technology that they're going to be using. Is there a tool that you particularly found useful in introducing teachers to just different technology tools? Is there one that you?
Right now my students are teaching online. I mean, my students who graduated last year, right now they're all teaching online. If they have a job, it's so hard for them right now to find a full-time job.
Sure.
But some of them came back to me, said, Professor Chen, I really appreciate your class because I'm using all the tools you introduced in my Zoom classes right now. So one thing they are using, I know it's the wheeldecide.com. That's a website that you can create a carnival wheel, and then you can use that as a random name picker for your classroom. So you can type in all your students' names and then, steer the wheel. And then students have the visual stimulation, and they're looking forward to have their name picked. And you also use it as a topic or a review machine, I guess.
Oh,
so for example,
okay.
you can input all the vocabularies there or grammars, and then when you're steering the wheel, you choose randomly chose a word, and then students will be able to, like, for example, word of the day, choose that word to create a sentence right away. Right. So I haven't had experience teaching English language learners directly, but what I do is to ask my teacher candidates after I demonstrate each tool to brainstorm different strategies that they want to use in their own classrooms. So always give them time to reflect and brainstorm. And I think that's the critical piece for us as educators, to have the creativity and to look into each tools and think, how can I use this differently? How can I use this creatively? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That is great scaffolding, right? Because like them just seeing that their name gets picked right at the beginning they're not involved with that, right? And then they're just saying, okay, whatever it is. And then they start to see little things like the vocabulary coming up, and it's like, oh, I have to use this vocabulary. I don't know what it's going to be ahead of time. It's just going to be on the moment. And then that turns into things like questions and different opportunity, and it shows the kind of the wide variety of places that you might go with a simple name picker, right? Because a name picker is not very complicated.
I know. Yeah. Have you heard the Mentimeter?
I
This is
have.
a new
I've seen it
Peter,
once or
I have
twice.
too, and I don't believe I've used it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, because that's a new tool I have been just trying recently, and I love it. Yeah, it's very similar to Pool Everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
I use this as a warm-up activity for my very first class this term. So a very simple question: how are you feeling today? Right? And then,
Mm-hmm.
and they have three bars. One is like, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling fantastic, or I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of just the words, you can also include a gift, GIF or gift.
GIF.
Jeff,
GIF.
GIF.
Jeff,
GIF.
you can't go wrong with this show.
You can't. Well, you tell us.
Yeah, so you can include a GIF image in each column, or in each bar. So in the I'm very fantastic, there was a kid like dancing with a birthday hat over there.
Mm-hmm.
So it just add another layer, and more the community building. Like you feel like students are having fun and they're not just responding to a simple like boring "how are you" question. Yeah, in the same way you're introducing you're introduce these teacher candidates and different tool.
And you know that I really like that too, because and nowadays that we're not teaching face to face, it is so important to be checking in with our students, right? And one of the questions that we're asked by our colleagues often, and I'm sure it's happened to you, is how do you build that community that you had perhaps in a face-to-face classroom? How do you build that community of belonging? How do you do that? And I know you touched on that, and so tell us what you've learned or what you've applied.
Community of belonging is super important. Actually, our university president, Jim Gash, he was talking about it just a few days ago. He wants to create this community of belonging for Pepperdine in general. And that inspired me of how can I build this community of belonging for my students, especially in this time to my online students. So what I encourage my students to do all the time is to use social media or any type of instant messaging tool to create their back channel. So even though when we are not even meeting during our Zoom sessions, they still can talk to each other in their WeChat or Facebook or Google Chat. Now it's Google Room probably. Yeah. So this term I found it especially challenging because they couldn't even meet in their orientation. So I started a group for them because I have all their emails. These are adult students, right? So I said, okay, so this is where you go from. You can go from your Google Meet room. Now you can see everyone's emails. And then now you decide which tool is more convenient for you, right? Because you give students more autonomy in deciding what they want to do with that. So as a student myself, I'm in my 4th year of doctoral study. We use back channel since day one. I actually was the one who created that group. So we were using the group to just casual chat. We ask for deadlines. We ask for clarification of the Zoom meetings. We ask for Zoom link. Trust me, all the time. What is the Zoom link for today? Is it 6 or 7 p.m.? With all the doctoral students too. So I definitely believe the back channel helps the community to continue learning, formally and informally, in their own space.
What's funny about that is I was talking to my son the other day, and he's a undergrad at Cal State Fullerton, and he was basically saying that in his classes, and this is all separate classes, but it's pretty interesting. He said every class that he goes into, someone pops in right on the first day and says, "Hey, I'm making our." It seems like everybody's using Discord, which is the
Yes,
Discord's like the
Discord.
gaming one, but like all the kids on there, they're just like, "Hey, here's a Discord chat for our class. Let's come and join if you want to and talk." And then he said like not all the students are doing it, but like I was super impressed. One, because everyone at the school is using the same platform, so I guess they've kind of semi-automatically built in a little culture of doing this, and people start to recognize that's what people use, and so they're at that school at Fullerton, that's what they seem to be using. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then also I love Weina, that you're saying, hey, you built it for them because they didn't know about this thing, but now it's also getting to the point where in some places students do know, and they do it by themselves. And there's a part of that to me that's also important, because at least in my case, like, they might not want the teacher in on that conversation. And
I forgot to tell you that I left after I built that.
Oh, you did? Great. Yeah.
I did. That's the most critical piece. I have to go.
You're like, goodbye, my baby. I made you, and now I have to set you free, right? But yeah, that's kind of that same point, which is, now you want them to have their own place, right? The students can have their place where they feel safe and they feel comfortable. And, he said, like, they like their teachers, but sometimes they make little jokes and things like that they wouldn't want to do in front of the teachers, whatever. So yeah, that it's a really cool way once students recognize that that's a possibility, or that, and I think for me, a lot of times, language learners don't really recognize or think about that as a possibility, so they're like, oh, like, everybody knows, like, all of my Chinese students, for example, they all have WeChat, right? And so you get like, so they're all on WeChat kind of together and like talking to each other. But then I've got my, my Persian students who don't know that, or, they might have Facebook or something, right? But then once you kind of say, hey, all of us get together, all of us, like, let's get on one platform to share and to talk to each other, that can be really powerful for them, and open up their thinking, like, extra culturally too. So I really like where that can go.
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah.
I was going to mention that you said that you like to give them a choice. You'd like to introduce them to something, and then you tell them, you guys figure out what's best for you. And I see that often happening with my students, where, again, like Brent said, my Chinese students will be on WeChat and they're used to that, forming their groups. But then you'll have a few Arab speakers who have never heard of WeChat, and perhaps they're using WhatsApp even more. And so they'll kind of, we'll start a group, they'll talk to each other, and then together they'll come to an agreement on what platform they're going to use. And I've seen students who flip back and forth, and they said, oh, I never heard about WeChat before, and I didn't know it could do this. Or the opposite. I just realized that all my friends are on WhatsApp, and I didn't know that. And so again, you're expanding their choices of tools that they can later, you never know what they're going to need later for whatever purpose. So I really like that you're giving them that option to learn and introducing them to different tools.
Yes, you're exactly right. So my students were learning all different social media tools, right? And then they a group of students end up created their own WeChat English classes for their first students. Of course, there are their families and their family friends in China, but they were super proud. They were like, yeah, we can totally use social media in teaching, right? Because they learned about that too, and they had a more creative mindset, like, how can I utilize and use the feature of the tool to teach? Yeah.
So this is something we had talked about a little bit too, like this creativity of using social media for the class, even if they won't use it, right? Even if they're saying, hey, I'm not actually going, hey, if I'm teaching in whatever country, maybe I don't have that tool available. So for example, in America, starting in a couple of days, possibly Chinese students will not have WeChat, right? We've seen this on the news. And so it's like, now we need to think about like some creativity and shifting around, or how are we going to deal with this? I mean, it's its own set of problems, but I love what you, we mentioned briefly in the pre-show that you were talking about, even if you're not going to use that thing, the creativity that goes into it can help you become a better, a more thoughtful teacher, right? Can you share a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yes, it's a habit fostering, I feel, right? So we are using all tools that is available maybe they're not attractive to the students at that moment, but we are using these tools to be a approach to foster the habit of being creative. And then, for example, they talk about how to use Facebook or Instagram to teach. Actually, one of my students was presenting in TESOL conference about how to use Instagram in ESL teaching. It was awesome. And in class time, they were brainstorming different ways. They were also like talking about how to use Pinterest in teaching English. So there are many ways. And then when they finished brainstorming, we had a small presentation and students learned from each other. They were like, wow, this is amazing. Like, I didn't know we can utilize Facebook with their polling function, with the video function, and we can use WeChat, for example, for interview function. So after they hear all the possibilities, they start to think, if there's something that I can do with a new tool that I will interact in the future. And I think as educators, it is critical for us to not just learn new tools, but have the skill set of how to utilize that tool in our own way to develop our specialty. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think about that sometimes too, because I gave Michelle a hard time about TikTok, but
I knew that was coming.
but there's something actually valuable to it, right? Because I like the idea that I want to go in, even if I'm not going to use this tool, I still kind of want to know a little bit about it, just so that I can think about how are people seeing the world a little bit, right? Or how are people understanding interaction through this process? And that to me is valuable, even though I personally am not going to get a TikTok account. But I know Michelle keeps saying that I have one because there's a DIESOL TikTok account, but the idea behind it is interesting to me. How are people communicating? And then, as just kind of passionate educators, we do the same thing. It's I wonder how people could use that in the classroom. I wonder how people could use that in order to communicate ideas. So I was watching a TikTok that was moved over to Twitter, which was this one recently about a firefighter was responding to this girl who had basically said it's all conspiracy theories, all the fires in California are conspiracy theories, and then he was in there watching her video, and then he's responding as her video's going, right? And I'm like, that's a really cool way for people to show critical thinking on issues that they disagree with, right? And that's something that's built right into TikTok that's not built into any other platforms that I'm aware of. And I'm like, I kind of get why that would be cool. So that was really interesting to me.
The power of social media, including TikTok, because they have authentic audience. It goes beyond the classroom. So when we give our students a task that they can post something or look for something on their social media, they feel it's part of their society. It's part of their life. It's not just inside the classroom doing for my assignment only. So for example, I asked students to write blogs on Google site. So instead of posting their blogs under assignment tab in the course site, they do their blog and make it available to the world.
Yeah.
And for them, that's more meaningful, and they definitely put more effort. They have photos, videos, their vlogs also on their website. So it definitely gives students different purpose in contributing. Yeah.
It's interesting. Oh,
go ahead.
I was going to mention that because, again, with teaching students and having them publish to an authentic audience can be quite a scary thing, especially if you're a shyer learner or you're just not, you don't want to put a lot of information out there. But I've observed students at the graduate level who were very, very reticent to do it. But as soon as you say, well, you don't have to put the picture of your face on there. You can put a picture of a drawing that you made. You can put a picture of a beautiful landscape from your country. And suddenly that boundary that they had set for themselves was removed. And now they're being super creative on what they're posting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I have to go back to Flipgrid because that's what my expectation to students was. I told them if you feel comfortable, you can videotape your face. If you're not comfortable, you can do a PowerPoint show and talk over the PowerPoint, or you can even use a staff animal, like do a voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
So different give students many flexibilities to be considerate of different student population. So yeah, that's great, Esol.
Actually, Brent, and I'm thinking, and I'm backtracking a little bit about TikTok. You mentioned, you guys are both mentioning having an audience and critical thinking. And I think one of the, I'm a TikTok consumer. Same as with Instagram. I don't post a lot. I definitely don't really post on TikTok. But I watch, and I'm seeing different generations talking the kind of conversations, short conversations that they're having. And just like you're saying, Brent, there's a different response that goes on with critical thinking. It's a way of showing your story. And, it is digital storytelling. It is telling part of your truth, and you're doing it real time. And then you're getting multiple responses, not just from one location, but all over the world. And I think that's what's fascinating to me, that you can, one of my colleagues recently told me she had a TikTok, and she's sort of like she would be like maybe my mom's age, and I was so surprised. But it again, it's another way of communicating, and having those pieces there are important, and understanding the audiences and the way that they're communicating. And I think that warrants a TikTok episode one day.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well. Okay. So we can have a TikTok episode one day. If we have access in America to TikTok, I mean, we have another big issue that just came up in the news. So with TikTok and WeChat are in trouble right now. Maybe will not be available after this weekend. So
it'll be available if you've download it now. You just won't get the updates, but download it now, Brent. You'll have access.
Yeah. So let's come back a little bit to the games, because I know that you said gamification and game-based learning is something that you want to deal with your students. And so how do you approach that? How do you choose games? How do you get students going on getting started with everything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So first of all, as we talked about before, it needs to be simple. Right, student will have an easier time to navigate through the platform. Maybe a QR code or a simple link that you can send in the chat box, so student can get it right away. And I prefer the games that doesn't need registration, so you can play and share, simultaneously on your platform. The other thing is I consider how useful this game is to my course content. So, for example, everyone right now use not Class Dojo. Everyone right now use Kahoot, right? Mm-hmm. They become too overwhelming. And sometimes we need to think about what is the level of learning the game is testing. So for example, to me, if you know Bloom's taxonomy, Kahoot is testing the lower level of learning, which is understanding. Mm-hmm. You're translating the word, you choose the correct word, right? Choose the correct answer. It's multiple choice. And how can you choose a game or maybe a learning activity? Doesn't have to be a game. In a higher level of learning, for example, ask them to create, to evaluate, to analyze something. Right. So when students create something or start to teach others about the knowledge, their knowledge retention is much stronger. They increased than just keep repeating the vocabulary or the meaning of the vocabularies.
Right. So with Kahoot, I agree with you there too, because what happens there's like students at this point, every teacher knows Kahoot now, and they're like, oh, it's so easy to set up, and I do it, right? And like, even if they're not a techie teacher, they've got Kahoot stuff going on. And then the students I saw, within the last year or so, like students just start going, oh, okay, it's another Kahoot time.
Kahoot
right?
fatigue. Yeah. There is such a thing.
Yeah.
Thing.
But so then I like this idea of what you're saying is then that the next step could be, okay, you're bored of maybe playing a Kahoot, but what about if you create a Kahoot, right? And keeping it even in that same tool set, right? And then you could flip that into the next level, which is, okay, not only that are you creating a Kahoot, but you now have to Flipgrid me a video explaining why you made the alternative choices on your 4 choices for your Kahoot, right? And so why are these choices ones that would be meaningful to someone who's going to play the game in the future, right? And then they're really thinking and explaining because this is the word form, but it's got the same base, but the suffix is different, and therefore it changes to the next thing, right? And so there's a lot of different ways that you could go with that and keep building, even with something that might be for a lot of students kind of like overdone, Kahoot in this case. But what's the next step?
I feel like we are the same person, because I asked students to create their own Kahoot as well. Because, it's actually more powerful that way. Because when they are deciding 4 answers, right, one is the right answer, 3 of them are the wrong answers, and they need to think the similar answers, right? So they're thinking, they're reflecting, and they want to have hard questions for their cohorts, for their classmates, if you are using Kahoot to let them play like team against teams, right? So it's definitely add another layer of learning if you ask them to do by themselves. Yeah. And teachers, we will save some time as well.
Yes.
Cool. So, Weina, I wanted to wrap up with a little bit about how much you involve your students in the social media environment. And by that, I mean Twitter. And if there's other stuff that you use, please mention it. I know that I'll notice on Twitter, I'll think like, Weina's students are tweeting. That must mean they just started a brand new course. And so I'm so excited because, you're introducing them to this tool, this really powerful tool. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. So this might be different for English language teaching because, most K-12 teachers, when they teach kids English, they don't necessarily use Twitter. But for me, to introduce Twitter to teacher candidates is to help them to develop a network of English language teachers. Just like us, I always see Esol and Brent's tweet, and I learn things from you. And I'm pretty sure other educators who are following you are feel the same way. So I do want them to know that teachers should be lifelong learners, and they need to connect with each other in online space. And so you're on track with the trend, especially for people who are like us, who are passionate about technology. It's changing every day, and we definitely want to keep it up. And Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, I'm not sure. I haven't used Instagram before, but I feel social media is a great place to start with. Yep.
That's excellent.
Awesome.
Yep, absolutely agree. So I guess we'll be seeing you on Twitter soon and your students.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to seeing more from your students. I think we're going to wrap up, but before we do that, we're going to jump over to our fun finds.
It is time for our fun finds.
Right.
And what? Oh, I thought you were interrupting.
No, I'm saying all right, good. Yay.
Oh, Brand.
I love fun finds. They're so
my
fun.
My fun find this time is not makeup. It is a book, because I am on vacation, actually. So I actually found the time to read for pleasure. And this is a serious book. It's called White Rage, and it's by Carol Anderson. I think many of you may have heard it, especially with the recent happenings. But
that's not fun at all. It's a great book. I didn't have fun reading it, though.
No, the thing is, like, the more I read, the more I become excited about the things that, again, and I don't want to excuse this, but I'm a language learner. So I was pulled out of the history classes to do language learning during those courses. So sometimes I feel like I'm missing a chunk of things. And I've learned these as an adult later. So for me, this is like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this. This is so cool. And cool in the sense that it's expanding my knowledge.
Yeah.
And so I would recommend it whether or not you missed history classes. But I just think it's so...
I'll point out as a white boy that was raised in a fairly white boy school, we were not taught all the stuff that was going on in that book. Like there were a lot of key things that were very much skipped over in our education in the 80s and 90s. So I mean, yes, you're right. There, we talked about some of these issues, but like the way that she digs into it in that book is like,
yeah. And if you're looking for a book, I know a lot of people are asking, I would like a book by a person of color. This is a place where you can start. I'm just, recommending it because I find it useful and others might find it useful as well. But it is my fun find.
Yeah,
because
cool.
It's for pleasure, for my own personal growth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's outstanding. So now I feel a little guilty because my change is not, it's totally different. Mine is a board game called Gatefall, which I got on Kickstarter. It's by this guy named Jack Dyer, and he's done like a bunch of games that you're probably familiar, like Super Fight and some of these card games and things. But this is like a full-on board game that it takes strategy and planning, and you're getting points and coins and things like that. So it was like fairly complicated. But anyways, I played it last night out in the park. And I got it a couple weeks ago, but I finally was able to play it last night with a friend, and it was like 2 hours of just not talking about anything else, but just being focused in on the game, which I haven't done for a long time, right? Like it's just like being separated from the pandemic and being separated from, school and screen and all of those things, and it's just like, I was just playing this game for a few hours, and it was fun, it was interesting, and it's definitely a unique and interesting game that is puts your brain to work a little bit. So Gatefall, it's worth checking out if you are interested in a different kind of game. Strategy
games, it's an excellent way to escape and also practice strategy.
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right, Weina, what do you got?
I feel like a nerd in developing my skills in Zoom. So I actually had so much fun, just found out the new feature in Zoom. You probably already know this. Zoom, you can share your PowerPoint and place yourself inside of the PowerPoint.
Yeah, right? Yeah, new feature. It's great.
I love it. So, one slide, I have like bullet points, right? So I was showing students, okay, agenda for the day, and I was moving my little head. When I was talking each bullet points, I was moving my head on top of that bullet point. So move myself around. It was very fun, and students were laughing about it. So sometimes teachers need to be a little silly. Yeah. And I have been investigating about those Bitmoji classroom templates. So I embed that feature with the Zoom background sharing. It was so much fun. I put myself in a window, myself in a bookshelf. I can literally use my finger to point to the whiteboard in the Bitmoji classroom.
That's right. Yeah. So with this feature, you can move yourself around and you can point at things. That's a very cool idea. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I have not had a chance to do that, but I can't wait.
Yeah, if you haven't tried it before, definitely. That's so fun, and it's very engaging for students to follow you along. Yeah.
Yeah, that's in the share screen and then the advanced
tab.
Yeah. Awesome. So thank you so much for listening to the show. You can win a one-of-a-kind DIESOL pin by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Anywhere you like, I guess. If we find it, if we go out there and find it somewhere else, it doesn't have to be on Apple. It can be anywhere, right?
Just tag us that we know it's there. Mm-hmm. And for the show notes and other episodes, check out diesel.org, or you can also listen at voiceed.ca.
And of course, you can find us on Twitter. Speaking of Twitter, you can find the show at DIESOL Pod, and you can find me at Brent G. Warner.
You can find me, Esol, at Ixy_Pixie. That's IXY_PIXY. And you can find Weina
Li Chen, WEINA LICHEN. In Korean, thank you is 감사합니다. 감사합니다 for tuning in to the DIESOL podcast.